Voci d'autore dalla Piazza. Authors' Voices from La Piazza. The mini Litcast of the first edition of the Italian Literary Festival La Piazza 2026, presented by the Italian Cultural Institute of San Francisco and the Cultural Association Librai in Corso. I am Sara Marinelli. To conclude and bookend this series, the last episode is in English with esteemed literary translator Ann Goldstein. We are at the Festival of Italian Literature Abroad, where stories cross linguistic borders through translation. Which works amongst the one that you translated or would like to translate expand beyond their geographical and cultural specificity and are an example of a more universal narrative?
Elena Ferrante's Neapolitan novels are the obvious example of a story that transcends the specific local setting. In addition to Ferrante, it also mentioned Alba de Cespedes, Forbidden Notebook from 1951, and There's No Turning Back from 1938, feature women characters whose experiences are strikingly similar to those of women today. Finally, Elsa Morante's History is about how war and displacement are experienced by ordinary people with few resources and what it does to their lives. Although it's an immensely detailed story of Rome during and after the Second World War, it could be translated into any time and any place.
Which Italian author, whether recent or from the past, do you always recommend reading?
I like to recommend the novels of Pier Paolo Pasolini, in part because he's not known here as a novelist, but rather as an infamous filmmaker. His prose is beautiful, moving between a kind of lyrical narrative voice and the rougher dialectical voice of the Roman underclass. Also, I recommend Ferrante's earlier novels, Troubling Love, The Days of Abandonment, and The Lost Daughter. All three are short, around 200 pages or less, compact, intensely focused explorations of a brief period in a woman's life, following her actions both physical and psychological.
Share an Italian word or expression or cultural concept that you found particularly challenging to translate and how you resolved that challenge.
Often more or less ordinary words with many meanings and nuances are hardest to translate. For example, early in Primo Levi's The Truce, Levi uses the word scomposti to describe a pile of bodies in the concentration camp. The verb it derives from, scomporre, means to take apart, but also to throw into disorder, to disarrange. Scomposto thus can mean dismantled or in disorder, or also unseemly or obscene. The problem is to decide which meaning is stronger and which should prevail. The cognate is discomposed, an adjective used of a person who is not in order. And my first idea was purely physical. These were corpses and they were decomposing. I rejected it as too literal and probably not true since it's winter. But as I considered the different meanings of scomposto and thought about the scene, the idea occurred to me of a jumbled pile of bodies, corpses jumbled together. We know that there is a common grave overflowing with bodies. I tried unseemly with the addition of pile of to underline the idea that the mass of bodies is obscene and that it is a mass, not individuals. But here I returned again to the scene, and reflecting on the whole, I began to think that unseemly carried too much emotion, too much moral judgment, and that the ideas of the bodies in disorder, the jumble of bodies, was stronger. The final version was jumbled corpses.
Voci d'autore dalla Piazza. Il micro Litcast è la prima edizione del Festival della Letteratura Italiana di San Francisco.